In this lecture, we are going to take a short break from our discussion of vendors and define what cloud computing is. Because working on the cloud is so prominent today, and this is the way that a lot of vendors are offering services, it's really important that we understand this fundamental concept. So we will start by defining what cloud computing is, and we will look at its advantages. We are then going to look at 3 models and 3 types of clouds. For our 3 models, we have infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. And for our 3 types, we have public, private, and hybrid. Now, I know the 3 types and 3 models might be a little confusing. There seems like there's some overlap there. When it comes to 3 types, think about 3 types of ownership. Is the cloud publicly owned by a vendor, for example? Is the cloud privately owned just by your organization? Or is it a hybrid? Is part of the cloud, part of the services are provided by your organization, and then the other part are they provided by a vendor such as Microsoft or Amazon? But we'll get more to that in just a minute. So this may go without saying, but every time I think that, I walk into a meeting where someone makes a really embarrassing comment about cloud computing. So I want to make sure that none of you face that type of situation. A cloud, to be sure, is just someone else's computer. There is no server in the sky. There is no magic repository of floating data somewhere in the Earth's atmosphere. When you use a cloud, you are accessing a data center. And there was a fantastic article very recently, I think either in the Washington Post or in the New York Times, about the growth of Northern Virginia as being a major global hub for the rise of data centers. This is particularly relevant given the rise of artificial intelligence and Gen AI. But that's a separate discussion. Just know that a cloud is someone else's computer. This is a server. This is data that's being stored in a data center. And so instead of having a computer on your desktop underneath your desk, or having a room or entire facility somewhere in your office that's devoted to housing all of the hardware, all of the infrastructure, you're just utilizing someone else's equipment. One of the useful things about cloud computing is that it can provide on-demand computing resources. Now, what I mean is this. Let's imagine that you're a small business and maybe you don't have a lot of confidence in your product. Perhaps this is an e-commerce website that you're setting up, for example. And on this website, you sell your own products. Well, let's say that you have everything stored on your own computer in your house or in your home office. Let's say that a video of your product goes viral and all of a sudden you have hundreds of thousands of people that are trying to access your website in order to buy this product. Chances are probably pretty good that if your website and all of your infrastructure is located in a small home office, that it's going to be unable to handle all of the traffic and requests. This may shut down your website. In contrast, if you were utilizing a cloud provider such as AWS or Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud, then that demand for more compute and more resources could expand, and you wouldn't have to worry about that sudden burst of traffic shutting down your website. And so when it comes to advantages, that example I just gave with your small business, that's an example of scalability. You can scale almost in real time as necessary when you're utilizing a cloud. Similarly, using a cloud service often translates into a lot of cost savings. It's very rare that I get to do this, but I'll do it once just for fun. Back in my day, we didn't have data centers. All right, that's the best that I can do it, and that's not really good. But I remember when the internet was just starting up, I did tech support for a small printer company. This was one of my very first jobs. And all of our hardware, all of our infrastructure was located in the office building. Now, think about what that takes to set up a mini data center in your own office. You have to purchase all of the hardware, all of the cabling. You're going to need to maintain and update all of that hardware. And you're going to need an IT team on site, perhaps 24/7, to troubleshoot any problems that might arise. Well, when you're utilizing the cloud, someone is doing that for you. And that's where we get to infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service, which is what we're going to talk about next. And here we have our 3 cloud models. And these are abbreviated as IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. Now, I know that software as a service, that acronym is often pronounced SaaS, but I don't hear PaaS and IaaS that much, and those both sound a little funny. Anyway, I've provided this visual down at the bottom, again, to try and make this abstract concept for you a little more concrete. So I want you to think about one of my very first jobs where I was working tech support for a printer company. That organization at the time was using legacy on-premise infrastructure. They owned all of the hardware, they had an IT team to maintain it 24/7, and that would be equivalent to owning a car. You buy a car, you're responsible for maintaining it, purchasing the insurance, filling up with gas, doing any maintenance. Nowadays, though, we have, again, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. Under the infrastructure as a service model, this would be similar to leasing a car. Your infrastructure as a service, what you're subscribing to, what you're purchasing, is the use of another company's servers, storage, network, and essentially their data center. It would be up to you to provide the tools, the operating system, and anything else needed to actually leverage that physical infrastructure. As for platform as a service, you get everything that infrastructure as a service provides, in addition to development platforms and tools, if you're developing software, for example, any of the middleware needed to leverage those platforms and tools, and the platform as a service provider is also going to give you an operating system. Under that situation, you would only be responsible for providing the applications. Finally, under software as a service, you are purchasing access to everything. You are getting access to the physical infrastructure, the storage, the compute, everything that the data center has. You're getting an operating system, all of the platform and development tools, and you're getting an application. Perhaps one of the most ubiquitous examples of software as a service now is an email application. Most of these are free. Proton Mail, Gmail, for example, those are both examples of software as a service. All of that data, all of that email, unless you're downloading it, is stored by default on Google's servers, for example, for Gmail. And so those are the three models. And while it's an imperfect analogy, you can think of infrastructure as a service as leasing a car, platform as a service as renting a car, and software as a service as rideshare. On this and the next two slides, again, I wanted to provide an example of what a data center stack might look like and what would be provided with those three different models. You don't need to memorize this for the CIPM exam. Again, this is just a concrete example to help you really wrap your head around this idea of cloud computing. So for infrastructure as a service, the physical infrastructure is provided by the third party, and the subscribing company, your organization, for example, has full control over that. And so if you're working with Amazon, for example, you're paying for access to the hardware in the data center, including networking, storage, servers, and any virtualization necessary. For platform as a service, you get all of that, plus the operating system, databases as necessary, and the vendor is also going to be providing security. You are only responsible for the application. Platform as a service is used mainly by developers for building applications. And finally, this is the easiest one. With software as a service, you get everything. The internet is providing your organization with access to web-based applications such as Gmail. Those applications are managed by a third party. And typically for software as a service, everything is available over the internet and you're accessing the application through a web browser. And so there's often no downloading or installation that's necessary. We're going to wrap up by quickly talking about the three cloud types. Again, think about these cloud types as ownership types: public, private, and hybrid. For the public type, the cloud is owned and operated by a third party. Again, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google Cloud are the biggest players in this space. And often what they're doing is they're renting out a multi-tenant environment or shared infrastructure. For a private cloud, the resources are dedicated to a single organization. These can be on-premise or hosted by a third party, but it's a single tenant environment. Think about apartments in a large building. The building is owned by one company, but you have individuals renting out and sharing a lot of space, sharing hallways, sharing walls, perhaps sharing waste disposal. That would be the public type. For private, however, you are renting the whole building. Again, a single tenant environment. Finally, a hybrid type of ownership combines public and private environments. This permits workloads to move between environments and requires integration and orchestration. Think about living in a building where perhaps your organization owns several floors, but you still have to share some infrastructure. In this lecture, we have gone over the basics of cloud computing. Remember, a cloud is just someone else's computer. Advantages include cost savings, scalability, and being easier to manage. 3 models are infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. And the 3 ownership types are public, private, and hybrid.